instead of the carbon atoms being in a straight line, they were joined in a chain. That's how they are. Okay, I mean joined in a ring. Now Plutarch was a Greek biographer and author, and he wrote, "Dreams are our most ancient and respected form of divination. Only in sleep do men receive inspiration from on high." Now, around 3,600 years ago, the biblical Joseph interpreted the Pharaoh's dream and predicted 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. And the Pharaoh raised him and made him, I think Joseph was like the governor of all Egypt. Now, the North Star and the moon concentrate and radiate polar opposite subconscious emotional energies or spirits. These are energies from other dimensions or life forms of other periods. Spirits radiated by the North Star seek death and destruction and the spread of sameness or conformity. Those radiated by the moon seek scientific understanding and the expansion of life and creation. Now, when the Earth spins or rotates rapidly, the moon moves closer to the Earth, and meaning ancestral energies are incarnating and concentrating. And when the moon drifts away from the Earth, when the Earth spins or rotates slowly, and radiations from the North Star concentrate and generate violence and insanity. Now, the methane fireball evaporated ocean waters 2.7 billion years ago. Water vapor concentrated in the upper atmosphere cooled, condensed, and fell to Earth as snow. Modern science says that South Africa, Central India, and Western Australia were glaciated 2.6 billion years ago, and glaciers yet remained in North America, Europe, Asia, and Eastern Australia, which means almost the whole Earth was glaciated with the exception of Central and South America and Antarctica. Now, a passage from Encyclopedia Britannica states that many single-cell organisms, those little unicellular organisms, can be frozen indefinitely to extremely low temperatures and then be thawed with no decrease in activity. Now, most of the time when I say an encyclopedia, I got it. I'm usually talking about Britannica or Americana, and otherwise I can be talking about something from any of those books, or other books too. Now, modern science theorizes that the moon was very close to the Earth, around 2 billion years ago. And the Earth revolved around the Earth 34 times, while the Earth made a complete revolution around the sun. This means that bacteria and blue-green algae were rapidly reproducing and spirits were rapidly incarnating. I think it usually revolves around the Earth 13 times during the year, and this time it was 34 times during the year. Now, colonies of bacteria and blue-green algae formed in Hudson Bay and Glenflint iron foundations in Ontario, Canada, around 2 billion years ago, when the moon was very close to the Earth. Now, geochronologists state that the blue-green algae in Glenflint formations was like the blue-green algae from the rocks of Australia. But the blue-green algae in Australia use C2 or C13 and magnesium as food for growth and creation. Now, the life forms in Canada added iron and manganese. Now, what were they taking into their bodies and integrating into their spirits? Now, manganese, atomic number 25, is a gray-white, hard, brittle metal. It's essential to steel making, and it's the hardening agent in Portland cement. Now, manganese reacts with oxygen to form manganese oxide. Compounds usually inhibit the growth of bacteria, but manganese interacted with sulfur and formed manganese sulfide, therefore neutralizing or canceling the effect of the sulfur. Bacteria then multiplied at a phenomenal rate. Modern scientists state that 2 billion-year-old fossils of bacteria in Canada are identical to fossils of bacteria that spread along the coast of Labrador, to southern Greenland, to Wales, and over much of Sweden, Finland, and the USSR. Now you have to keep in mind that there was nothing on Earth besides bacteria and blue-green algae. There was only forms of life prior to 1.4 billion years ago. Now around 2 billion years ago, the respiratory products of the spreading bacteria built up the oxygen in the atmosphere and shielded the Earth's surface from ultraviolet radiation, which causes mutation, change, and new forms of life. Okay. Now, around 1.4 billion years ago, the blue-green algae in gunflint mutated or changed into green algae. And green algae has a more complex and advanced intrastructure, but other blue-green algae degenerated and lost the ability to manufacture chlorophyll and became parasitic fungi. And unable, this is fungi, unable to support itself. It had to live off different waste or other living material. It couldn't feed itself. Okay, so now between 1.4 and 1.2, all the different little communities from gunflint, that would be blue-green algae, green algae, fungi, and bacteria, they were carried by the water currents. They spread into England, USSR, Eastern California, and Bitter Springs, Australia. And they formed large communities in all locations. Now, modern science states that the respiratory products of the algae in all those locations raised the oxygen levels, and the deep sea became oxygenated, giving the oceans their current state. That's how they got like they are. Now, almost all the free oxygen present in today's atmosphere is a product of photosynthesis by plants. Okay. Manganese interacts with oxygen to form manganese oxide, which is anti-ferromagnetic, meaning that at low temperature, the manganese will the manganese atoms will act as tiny magnets and arrange themselves over a material so that it cancels out the external magnetism. Now, manganese antiferromagnetic compounds coated the Earth's inner core and changed the magnetic properties of the Earth, and once again formed a sphere that halted the expansion of creation. Now, the sun novaed around 1.2 billion years ago, and all of energies of creation that had been held back by the shield cycled through the Earth, shattering the anti-ferromagnetic shield that had been generated by bacteria that used manganese. Now, a passage from the Encyclopedia Britannica states, one interesting source of manganese is from manganese nodules found on the ocean floor. These roughly spherical rocks contain mixtures of manganese and iron oxides, as well as smaller amounts of other metals, such as cobalt, nickel, and copper from the Earth's core. Apparently, the nodules were formed at least partly by the action of marine organisms. Because of the abundance of these nodules, there's much interest in developing economic methods for their recovery and processing. So in other words, somebody's going to just recover them and process them, and they don't know where they came from or how they got there, which is what they did with the manganese. You have to know what you're using. Okay, creation expanded with the nova of the sun and the shattering of the manganese sphere that had enclosed the Earth. Now, unicellular plants expanded into or evolved multicellular plants, and the first unicellular animals evolved in South Africa. Iron, atomic number 26, is called the heavenly or divine metal. Iron gives the Earth its magnetic properties, and unicellular animals incorporated iron into their body structure and evolved hemoglobin. Now, I think it's so interesting. Oh, we're not there yet. Yes, we are. The hemoglobin has the same structure that chlorophyll has. It's just that chlorophyll has a magnesium ion in one atom in one place, and hemoglobin has an iron atom in the same place. So you can see intelligence is we're sharing information, which is what they do. They work together. It's all one project. Now the iron in hemoglobin transports oxygen to the body tissues. The textbook says the transport of oxygen by hemoglobin is very efficient and increases 50 times the amount of oxygen which could be carried in solution by the liquid part of the blood. Now when the sun nova 1.2 billion years ago and creation expanded with the evolution of multicellular plants and unicellular animals in South Africa. Now geochronologists report a marked shifting of the Earth's crust occurred as creation continued expanding. Then the first 4 glaciations began. Glaciers left traces on all continents, but especially in Africa and southern Australia, which were then positioned where Antarctica currently lies.